I'd been working nights at the Haven Creek Gasco for almost a year. The job wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and gave me something I hadn't had in a long time: quiet. After the divorce, I couldn't stand being in the house anymore. Every corner held an echo of what went wrong. The gas station became my refuge. It smelled like burnt coffee and old rubber, and I liked it that way. Nights on Route 18 were long and still. I'd stand behind the counter, counting the same stack of lottery slips, watching headlights appear and disappear into the black stretch of highway. There was comfort in the routine: refill the coffee machine at 2, check the coolers at 3, mop the floors before sunrise. The hum of the refrigerators was my lullaby. The customers were predictable too. Truckers who didn't talk much, teenagers sneaking beer, the occasional tired traveler asking for directions. I'd learned to read people fast: who wanted to talk, who didn't, who might cause trouble. That night in November, I was just grateful for the calm. Around 2 in the morning, the security camera above Pump 2 flickered again. It had been doing that for weeks. I made a note to call maintenance in the morning. Then the chime over the door rang. A man stepped inside. He looked ordinary enough. Mid-30s, faded denim jacket, jeans, boots caked with mud. He didn't buy anything, just paced the aisles like he was looking for something he couldn't find. "Everything okay, sir?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He looked up slowly and smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach the eyes. "Yeah," he said softly. "Just passing through." Then he walked out. The chime rang again. I looked through the glass. No car, no footsteps, just the empty lot glowing under the harsh lights. For a second, I thought maybe I'd imagined him, but the door still swayed from where he'd pushed it open. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe he parked down the road. Maybe he just needed to stretch his legs. But I couldn't shake the cold weight settling in my chest. 10 minutes later, the chime rang again. This time he was wearing a dark hoodie and gloves. Same posture, same dragging step, same tilt of the head. My throat went dry. He didn't wander the aisles this time. He walked straight to the counter. "Back again?" I tried to laugh, but it came out thin and shaky. He didn't answer. He set a pack of gum on the counter. Then, from his pocket, he pulled out a small handgun and laid it down beside the gum like it was just another item to scan. My body froze. He slid a crumpled dollar bill across the counter. "Keep the change," he said, voice low and calm. I nodded, hands trembling. "Sure thing." He took the gum, tucked the gun back in his jacket, and walked out without looking at me again. The chime echoed in the silence. I locked the door the second he was gone. My heart was racing. I called the sheriff's office, voice shaking as I explained what happened. The deputy who arrived was young, couldn't have been more than 25. He looked around the store, checked the cameras, and shrugged. "You said he didn't threaten you." "No," I said. But it was him. Twice. Different clothes. Same guy. He replayed the footage, but the image glitched. Static where the man's face should have been. "Maybe the feed's corrupted," the deputy said. "We'll file a report." He left me with a case number and a suggestion to stay alert. That was all. When I got home that morning, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that faint smile. The way his eyes looked past me, like I wasn't even there. A week passed, and nothing happened. Still, I couldn't shake it. I'd flinch whenever the chime rang. I started noticing cars parked too long across the road, headlights that lingered just a little too long before pulling away. I told myself I was being paranoid, but that didn't make it stop. When I asked the sheriff for an update, he said there was no record of anyone matching that description. No prints on the counter, no trace at all. He said maybe the guy was just passing through, maybe just another drifter. I wanted to believe that. But one night I was taking the trash out behind the station when I saw something by the dumpster. Boot prints. Deep ones, pressed into the frost. They weren't mine. They led toward the tree line and vanished into the dark. I stood there for a long time, my breath fogging in the cold air. Inside, I checked the clock, 2:13 a.m. The same time he'd first come in. After that, I started keeping the door locked after midnight. Regulars could wave through the glass and I'd buzz them in. I bought a baseball bat and kept it behind the counter. I started sleeping with the lights on at home. The nights dragged on, each one longer than the last. My co-workers joked about me getting jumpy, but they didn't know. They didn't see how the world gets smaller after something like that, how even silence starts to sound dangerous. It was mid-December when he came back. The wind had picked up that night, rattling the glass doors. I was refilling the coffee pot when the chime rang. I didn't even look up at first. Then I heard his voice. "Coffee still the same?" My hands froze. I turned. He stood by the counter, no gun this time, no smile either. Just that same blank stare. "What do you want?" I asked. He looked around slowly. "Did they ever fix your cameras?" I swallowed hard. "You should leave." He nodded slightly. "I will. But you should know. Some people come and go and no one ever really sees them." "Not really." I didn't understand what he meant. I still don't. He walked out before I could say another word. The chime echoed again. I ran to the door, but by the time I looked outside, there was nothing. No car, no footprints in the snow. The next morning, I told the sheriff again. He checked the footage, static, same as before. Only this time the timestamp flickered, 2:13 a.m., then went blank. I quit the job a week later. Couldn't stand the silence anymore. Every creak, every hum of the fridge felt like a warning. I moved 2 towns over, started working days at a hardware store. Still, some nights I wake up at 2:13 a.m., heart pounding, certain I've heard that door chime again. I don't know what he wanted, or if he was even real. Maybe he was just another broken man passing through the same kind of emptiness I was living in. Maybe we were both just ghosts of something we lost. All I know is that after that night, I learned to see people differently. The quiet ones. The ones who stare too long. The ones who never say what they're thinking. You start realizing how thin the line is between ordinary and dangerous. How sometimes they're the same thing. Sometimes evil doesn't roar. It whispers. It walks into your life looking like any other stranger, buys a pack of gum, and leaves you questioning everything you thought was safe. Never ignore the feeling that something isn't right. Your instincts are your first defense, and the cost of silence is often far higher than fear itself. I was 12 the summer Grandma decided she wanted to see America one last time before her eyes went bad. She told my mom it was just a drive, nothing to fuss over. But even then, I could tell it wasn't about sightseeing. Grandma was fighting something quieter. Loneliness, maybe. Or the way age sneaks up and takes pieces of you without asking. Mom didn't want me going. "She drives too fast," she'd said. But Grandma promised she'd bring me back before school started. She said the trip would be our little adventure, and when Grandma used that voice, there was no saying no. We left Missouri just after dawn on a Monday in her old silver Buick. The car smelled like lemon air freshener and fabric softener, the radio playing old country songs that skipped every few miles. I remember watching the horizon shift colors through the windshield. First blue, then gold, then that pale desert white that makes you squint even behind sunglasses. By the third day, the chocolate we'd bought in Oklahoma had melted into a sticky mess, and the car's AC was barely pushing warm air. Grandma still looked determined, her sunglasses low on her nose, her hands steady at 10 and 2. I think she was proving something, to herself, to time, maybe even to me. When the fuel light blinked, we'd just passed a sign that said, "Next services, 47 miles. Grandma sighed, muttering, these endless miles of nothing before spotting a faded sign half buried in weeds. Pine Hollow Gas Dine, 1 mile ahead. The building looked like it had been dropped there decades ago and forgotten. The Gas Dine sign buzzed with half-dead letters, throwing orange light onto cracked pavement. One gas pump stood crooked, and a tumbleweed bumped against it like it was trying to escape. Inside, the air was stale and cold. The walls were lined with faded snack displays and old postcards no one bought anymore. A man stood behind the counter. Pale skin, thinning hair, and eyes that followed us the moment we walked in. His name tag read, Earl. "Evening, ma'am," he said, voice slow and measured, like he was testing each word before letting it go. "Just filling up, hun," Grandma said, polite as always. As she headed for the restroom, I stayed by the candy rack, pretending to read labels. Earl didn't look away from me, not once. He kept wiping the same spot on the counter with a rag that was already spotless. When Grandma came out, she didn't say a word. Just handed me the keys, smiled tight, and said, "Let's go, sweetheart." We didn't talk much for the first few miles after leaving Pine Hollow. The road stretched straight and endless, like the desert didn't know how to curve. I watched Grandma's hands gripping the wheel tighter than usual. Her wedding ring glinted in the dying sunlight, trembling just slightly with every bump in the road. After 20 minutes, I noticed headlights appear in the rearview mirror. A dusty pickup, maybe red or brown. It was hard to tell in the fading light. It stayed behind us, steady, not too close but close enough to make you notice. "Probably another traveler," I said. Grandma didn't answer. The sky was turning violet now, storm clouds building along the horizon. Lightning flickered far away, lighting up the mountains like camera flashes. Grandma pressed harder on the gas pedal. The car behind us did the same. It didn't pass. It didn't fall back. When I looked again, I could make out the shape of the driver, cap pulled low, shoulders still like a shadow carved out of the dim. As the sun dropped, so did the temperature. The desert turned to ink. Only our headlights and his cut through the dark. "Maybe he's headed to the next town," I whispered. Grandma's voice was tight. "Then he can pass us." He didn't. For the next hour we drove in silence. Every time we slowed for a turn, so did he. Every time we sped up, he matched us. Grandma didn't say anything else, but her jaw was set, and the lines around her mouth looked deeper than I'd ever seen them. When we hit a stretch of open road, she pulled over suddenly like she'd made up her mind about something. "If he's just driving, he'll pass," she said. But he didn't pass. He stopped too, right behind us. Her hand shot to the gear shift. "Hold on." The tires kicked up a wave of dust as we sped forward, the engine groaning. I turned back. The truck's headlights flashed once, then followed again. Hours passed. The radio went silent when we lost the signal, leaving only the sound of wind and gravel under the tires. The world outside felt endless. No houses, no towns, no light except his. Every so often the headlights disappeared, and I'd start to hope he'd turned off somewhere. But minutes later they'd return, closer each time. Around midnight, Grandma said quietly, "We're not stopping again, no matter what." Her voice shook just enough for me to notice. I nodded. "Okay." I tried to stay brave, but my stomach hurt from holding my breath. I kept turning around, half expecting to see his face through the glare. But all I ever saw was that steady glow. By 2 a.m., the gas gauge hovered near empty. Grandma's face was pale, the map folded uselessly on the dash. "We'll make Ridge City," she whispered. "We'll make it." When the lights vanished for the last time around 4, she didn't slow down. She just kept driving, eyes locked forward. "Don't look back," she said. "We're almost there." But I did. I looked anyway, and for a split second before the road curved, I saw a dark shape parked on the shoulder, motionless, like it was waiting. We reached Ridge City just after sunrise. The streets were quiet, the air cool and damp from the night storm. Grandma didn't even pull into a gas station. She drove straight to the police station, stopping so suddenly the tires squealed. A young officer came out, startled. "Ma'am, you okay?" She stepped out slowly, her hands trembling. "Someone's been following us since Flagstaff," she said. The officer nodded, motioning another cop over. They searched the highway for hours. Nothing. No truck, no driver, no sign anyone had followed us. When we gave the description, I mentioned the man's red cap. The officer's expression shifted. "You sure about that?" "Yeah," I said. And his name tag said Earl. He looked at Grandma, then back at me. "Ma'am, Pine Hollow's been closed for 6 years, burned down after a grease fire." Grandma just stared at him. "We were there last night." He shook his head. "Couldn't have been." Grandma never drove again after that trip. She sold the Buick and started taking buses everywhere. When people asked, she said her eyes had finally given out. But I knew it wasn't her vision that changed. It was something deeper. I'm older now, with a daughter of my own. Sometimes when I drive through small towns at night, I catch myself glancing at the rearview mirror. Part of me expects to see those same headlights again, steady and patient, waiting for me to stop. Maybe it was just a man who didn't know how close he came to terrifying a family. Maybe it was something else entirely, a memory that refused to fade. Either way, that summer changed me. It taught me that some fears don't live on the road. They live inside the people who survive it. Fear isn't always loud. It's often quiet, steady, and patient, like headlights that never pass. Trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, it probably is. And sometimes, survival isn't about fighting. It's about listening to the small voice inside that says, "Keep driving." I was never a fan of long drives at night, especially after Halloween parties. The roads feel emptier, the darkness heavier. That night, I'd left my cousin's place in Shelbyville later than I should have. Too much caffeine, not enough food, and 3 hours of Tennessee back roads ahead of me. My phone battery hovered at 8% and the gas gauge had dipped below a quarter tank. I told myself I'd make one more stop before hitting the interstate. I remember the fog rolling in as I turned off the main highway, dense and low like smoke curling over the asphalt, the kind of fog that swallows headlights whole. That's when I saw the sign. Hollow Creek Gas Market. The flickering letters appeared out of the mist like a mirage. The place looked old but open, light spilling from the windows, the faint buzz of a neon beer sign glowing red against the fog. I slowed, turned in, and rolled up beside the only working pump. Inside, the air smelled of coffee, dust, and rain-soaked pavement. A TV on the counter hissed with static, showing half of a football game that had probably ended hours ago. The man behind the counter looked up and nodded. "Storm's getting bad out there, son," he said. "Be careful on 49 tonight. Roads close sometimes without warning." He had one of those soft southern drawls that made warnings sound like advice. I smiled politely, paid for gas, and grabbed a cup of coffee that tasted like burnt rubber. As I walked back to my car, he called out, "Keep your lights low in that fog. You'll see more than you want to." I laughed nervously, waved, and got in. The words stuck with me longer than I liked to admit. The GPS chimed just as I started the engine. "Road ahead closed, take alternate route." I frowned. The map redrew itself, highlighting a smaller road that veered off through the woods. I didn't think twice. It was late, I was tired, and I just wanted to get home. The road started smooth but quickly turned narrow and cracked, swallowed by trees on both sides. My headlights hit patches of mist so thick it looked like driving through milk. 15 minutes passed before I realized I hadn't seen a single car. No houses, no signs, no sound but the hum of the tires and my heartbeat. Then I saw them, figures along the tree line. At first I thought they were scarecrows, but as I crept forward the shape shifted, human, motionless, facing the road. My high beams caught flashes of white. Masks, clown masks, 10, maybe more, spaced out like they'd been waiting. My foot froze on the brake. I told myself it had to be a prank, teenagers screwing with late-night drivers. But something about how still they were made my throat go dry. "Not funny," I whispered, even though they couldn't hear me. Then one moved, A man stepped forward, holding a wooden bat over his shoulder. Another started walking too. The rest followed, slow and deliberate. My pulse spiked. I slammed the car into reverse. Gravel spat from the tires. The figures broke into a run. One slapped the back window, hard. The sound echoed through the car like a gunshot. I hit the gas, spinning back toward the main road, fog swallowing the shapes behind me. I didn't breathe for a full minute after the road straightened. My hands were shaking so badly the wheel felt slick. The fog thinned, and I expected to see flashing police lights, maybe a roadblock, the closed section the GPS warned about. But the road was wide open. No cones, no signs, no cars. I checked the GPS again. It said I was back on Highway 49. The detour road I'd just come from didn't even appear on the map anymore. When I finally saw the glowing sign for Indre Maple Ridge gas station, I pulled in and parked too fast. The attendant, a young guy with shaggy hair, looked up from his phone as I stumbled inside. "You okay, man?" he asked. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I tried to explain. The fog, the detour, the people in masks. My words tumbled over each other. He frowned. "You said Hollow Creek Gas Market?" "Yeah," I said. "You know it?" He blinked. "Buddy, that place burned down 5 years ago. Electrical fire. Whole building's gone. There's nothing out there but a signpost." I stared at him, shaking my head. "No, it's still there. I just bought gas." His expression shifted from curiosity to concern. "You sure you're not mixed up? Maybe you stopped somewhere else?" I didn't answer. My hands were still trembling. I didn't sleep when I got home. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the clowns' faces. By dawn, I'd convinced myself it had to be exhaustion, or a Halloween prank, or both. Still, something wouldn't sit right. My gas tank, when I checked it in the daylight, was still nearly empty. The receipt I thought I'd taken from the counter wasn't in my pocket. That afternoon, I drove back toward County Road 49. The fog had lifted, the sun bright enough to sting my eyes. The road looked different in daylight, less mysterious, more broken down. When I reached the spot where the gas station had been, I saw nothing but a charred foundation and weeds growing through the concrete. An old metal sign leaned against a post, the words barely legible. Hollow Creek Gas Market. No pumps, no lights, no building, just ruin. I got out, the gravel crunching under my shoes. A faint smell of burned wood still lingered, years later. I knelt by the ashes, running my fingers over the ground, searching for anything, something to prove I hadn't imagined it. But there was nothing. Then I noticed tire tracks leading off the side road, fresh and deep, cutting toward the trees. Maybe from my car, maybe not. I followed them for a few yards before they disappeared into the brush. For the first time, it hit me how lucky I'd been that night. If I'd stopped, rolled down the window, gotten out, it could have gone bad. Very bad. A week later, a local deputy called me back after I'd reported the masked men near Hollow Creek. "Son," he said, "you're not the first one to say something about that area. Teens pull stunts out there every Halloween. A couple of years back, a driver nearly crashed when someone jumped in front of his car wearing a clown mask." "So it was a prank?" I asked. "Probably. We found empty beer cans and cheap masks in the woods last year. They like to scare people. You were just unlucky enough to find them." He paused. "But I'll tell you this. Don't drive alone through those back roads after dark. Nothing good ever happens past midnight." I thanked him and hung up, relief washing through me. But not completely. Because even knowing it was just people didn't erase the memory of that cold hand slapping my window. It didn't make the fear less real. Sometimes when I drive at night, I still think about the man behind the counter. Maybe he was real, maybe not. Maybe my mind filled in the blanks when exhaustion blurred the lines. What mattered wasn't whether the gas station existed. It was how easily fear turned shadows into monsters, and how close I came to letting panic steer the wheel. I never meant to come back to Astoria. After high school, I'd promised myself I'd leave the gray drizzle behind, The smell of wet wood and salt water, the endless sound of waves against the shore. Life, as usual, had other plans. College loans, rent that ate half my paycheck, and a family who kept pulling strings had me driving north on Highway 101. Back toward the coast, I thought I'd escaped. The Harbor Light Gas Grocery was a small, weather-beaten building perched on the edge of the docks where the wind brought waves of mist straight off the Pacific. Its neon sign flickered like a heartbeat, advertising open 24 hours to anyone who cared to notice. I had agreed to cover a co-worker's holiday shift. Christmas had passed the night before, leaving a quiet that pressed into my chest like a vice. My mom had called that evening. "Don't stay up too late," she'd said, worry threading her voice. "I'll be fine, Mom. It's just one night," I told her, though I didn't believe it. The store smelled of canned soup and cheap coffee. I restocked shelves, wiped counters, and listened to the hum of the soda machine. The windows fogged with my breath, and every time I glanced outside, I half expected the storm clouds and mist to form shapes I didn't want to see. I had learned long ago that quiet nights in small towns could hide more than you realized. Around midnight, I noticed him for the first time. A man standing under the yellow streetlight outside, motionless, head tilted slightly toward the glass. At first I thought he was just waiting for a friend, or maybe a drunk staggering along the docks. But the way he held himself, completely still, completely observing, made my skin prickle. I opened the door to ask if he needed help. "Sir, are you okay?" No response. He stepped out of the light and vanished into the fog. I shook my head, blaming it on tired eyes and the storm. But deep down, something told me to watch. The wind pushed in damp waves, carrying the faint scent of fish and rain-soaked earth. Every instinct screamed at me that this night wouldn't be normal. A few minutes later, the door chime rang. I looked up. He had entered. Wet boots squeaking across the tile, flannel soaked through, eyes hollow. "Evening," I said softly, forcing calm into my voice. He didn't respond, just wandered the aisles, dragging his fingers along the shelves. I could feel my pulse in my throat. When he knocked over a stack of chip boxes and let out a high, wrong laugh, my stomach twisted. Something was very, very wrong. I took a slow step back toward the door, hoping he hadn't noticed me. "Sir, you can't do that," I said, trying to sound steady. "You okay?" He crouched behind aisle 3, giggling again, almost childlike but not innocent. My throat tightened. That's when I saw it. His hand holding something small, silver, sharp, a knife. Adrenaline hit me like a freight train. I bolted outside, fumbling for my keys, rain smearing my vision. My fingers shook as I locked myself in my car and called 911. Through the windshield, I could see his shadow moving inside, darting between aisles like a predator. Minutes felt like hours. The storm pressed down around me, wind pushing the mist into the edges of my vision. I watched as police cars arrived, lights spinning red and blue in the fog. Officers swept the store, found nothing. The back door to the docks was open, flapping in the wind. He was gone. 2 officers showed me the security footage. My stomach sank. The man had entered through the side door long before I saw him. He had been hiding behind shelves, crouching low, watching me the whole time. "You're lucky, kid," one officer said quietly, voice low, eyes on the screen. He had the knife the whole time. I couldn't speak. The footage confirmed it. I had been walking around oblivious to the danger inches from me. The mist outside pressed against the glass like the world itself was holding its breath. When I got home at dawn, I sat in my car for 10 minutes, still hearing the faint echo of his giggle in my head. I didn't sleep that morning. I couldn't. Driving along the coast, the mist clinging to the windshield, I couldn't help but remember why I hated nights like these. When I was 10, my father had disappeared in a storm. Not out here on the docks, but in the woods behind our old house. His truck was found crushed under a fallen tree. The memory of that night had always lurked in the background, dormant but awake whenever thunder rolled. Now, 20 years later, it felt alive again. I thought about the man in the store, the pacing, the giggling, the knife. There was something familiar in the way he moved, something that felt predatory and lost at the same time. I realized I had been lucky. Pure luck. I couldn't stop thinking about what could have happened if I'd been slower, less alert. The mist outside my apartment window seemed thicker than usual that night, curling around the edges of the glass like fingers reaching for me. Police kept the back door sealed after my report. Officers patrolled the docks, interviewed dock workers, and checked the surrounding streets. No one reported seeing a man matching the description, and nothing was found in nearby alleys or warehouses. But I couldn't let it go. The thought that someone had been in the store, knife in hand, watching me for minutes, possibly longer, made my chest tight every time I closed my eyes. I visited the store again in daylight, walking through the aisles. Everything was as it had been. No sign of forced entry, no discarded items, just the faint scent of wet flannel and fear lingering in the air. I knew the man had been there. I could feel it. The officers assured me that he probably had fled to the fog, to the open docks, to wherever criminals vanish in coastal towns. But instinct told me he hadn't left. Not entirely. Shadows like that don't disappear. They wait. Months later, I returned to the gas station during a daylight run. The storm clouds had lifted, replaced by a low gray sun reflecting off the wet asphalt. Inside, everything looked normal, but I couldn't shake the memory. Crouching behind aisle 3, his hollow eyes, the knife glinting in fluorescent light. Every time I drive past that station, I feel a pull to look inside. I see the faint outline crouched low behind the shelves, waiting for someone to notice. It's a reminder. Danger is often silent, invisible until it's too late. I learned something that night. Instincts matter. Fear isn't weakness. Fear is a signal. That night could have ended differently if I had ignored the warning signs. I don't know if he ever returned after that foggy December night. Maybe he did. Maybe he waits in other small towns, invisible to the world but very present to someone who isn't paying attention. I never thought I'd end up back in Helena, Montana, of all places. Growing up in this state, I always swore I'd leave the small towns behind, the endless stretches of road, the forests that seemed too thick, too quiet. But life has a funny way of reminding you that the past never really lets go. Rent in Billings had doubled, and my old sister had twisted my arm into covering an overnight shift at the Silver Cross fuel stop, miles out of town along Route 93. She joked it would be fun, said the isolation would do me good. I didn't tell her that storms made my chest tighten and my throat go dry, that the sound of rain against metal roofs had haunted me since I was 10. That night, the storm rolled in like a freight train. I pulled up to the station, headlights cutting through sheets of rain that hammered the glass, wind bending the sign like it wanted to snap it clean off its pole. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed. The smell of coffee lingered, stale but comforting. I took a deep breath, pushed my jacket off, and tried to act normal. It had been years since I'd worked a graveyard shift. Months, really. My usual life was safer. Office cubicles, fluorescent light that didn't flicker, streets that never went silent at 2 a.m. But here I was, alone in a gas station surrounded by endless black forests and a storm that seemed intent on tearing the world apart. I called my sister before my shift started just to hear a familiar voice. "I'll be fine," I said. "It's just rain." She laughed, the way only she could, warm and teasing. "You sound like Mom when she pretends she's not scared." I smiled, but the memory of my father's last night lingered at the edge of my thoughts. The truck found crushed beneath a fallen pine, the cold smell of metal and mud, the hollow look on my mother's face. I set up the station, wiped counters, filled the coffee machine, checked the pumps. Hours passed with only the hum of fluorescent light and the rhythmic pounding of the rain. Midnight came and went, and then I saw him. A tall man, pacing near the diesel pumps. No umbrella, no car, just long, slow circles in the pouring rain. My gut clenched. Something about the way he moved, mechanical, deliberate, made the hairs on my arms stand straight. "Sir, you okay out there?" I called through the glass. The rain pelted my voice back at me. He didn't answer, just kept pacing. Lightning flashed, revealing the sharp angles of his face for a fraction of a second, then gone again, swallowed by the storm. I tried to shake the feeling, telling myself it was someone stranded, just a drunk or a lost traveler. But the instinct in my chest said otherwise. Don't let him in. Hours passed. I cleaned the floor, made coffee, tried to ignore the storm pounding the roof. Then the doors rattled violently. Bang, bang, bang. And my heart jumped so hard I dropped the cup, shattering it on the tile. The man was there, soaked to the bone, eyes hollow. "Please," he said, "let me in." I hesitated. The smell of wet earth and something metallic hit me as he stepped closer. His hands were bleeding, knuckles raw. "You need help?" I asked softly. "Don't call anyone," he snapped, voice low and urgent. I froze, fingers inches from the phone. The storm didn't ease. We sat in silence, the wind screaming outside, my heart thumping in my ears. Then, just as suddenly, he unlocked the door and left, disappearing into the rain like a ghost. By morning, the storm had moved east, leaving the station dripping and quiet. I told the sheriff about the encounter. He raised an eyebrow, asked the usual questions, and left with a polite nod. The cameras showed me talking, my hand on the door, staring into the storm, but the man was invisible. I tried to shake it off, but the unease clung like humidity on my skin. 2 days later, a report came over the radio. A woman missing from a town 30 miles north, last seen arguing with her boyfriend in the storm. Her car had been abandoned near our station, the passenger seat soaked with blood. I drove there after my shift, parked a safe distance away. The car sat there like a dark monument to something terrible. I could see the police had already combed the area, but the sense of unease didn't leave me. My father's memory flickered in my mind again. The night he disappeared, the silence that followed, the absolute wrongness of being alone when danger strikes. Back at the station that night, the storm returned with a vengeance. The same slow rhythm outside the glass, the dripping sound. I flicked on all the lights, checked the locks, and tried to convince myself it was my imagination. Hours passed. Nothing. But when I finally allowed myself to rest behind the counter, I heard it. Footsteps pacing, slow and deliberate. I grabbed a baseball bat from under the counter, heart hammering. The storm rattled the roof, lightning illuminating the pumps in violent staccato bursts. And then he appeared again, just as before. Drenched, silent, pacing. "Who are you?" I demanded, voice steadier than I felt. No answer, just the wet echo of his steps on the concrete. When morning came, I realized I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something about him wasn't human, or maybe it was, but it was broken, dangerous, and tied to something I couldn't yet understand. I called my sister, trying to explain the encounter. She laughed nervously at first until I described the pacing, the hollow eyes, the blood. "You need to be careful," she said. "Trust your instincts, don't let him in." I couldn't shake the feeling that the storm had summoned more than rain. It had called up memories, fears, and shadows from my past. My father's death, my mother's trembling voice, my own nights lying awake listening for footsteps. I'd thought those things were buried. But now, in the storm, they felt alive again. That night, I stayed in the back office, doors locked, blinds drawn. Every lightning flash made me flinch. Hours dragged. The clock ticked slowly. Then, faintly at first, I heard it. A metallic tapping, a rhythm that didn't match the storm. I froze, listening. The man stepped inside. Same pacing, same bloodied knuckles. "Why are you following me?" I asked. He didn't answer. Just turned his head slightly, hollow eyes meeting mine. I could feel the intensity of him, the weight of some unspoken rage or grief pressing against the small, fluorescent-lit room. I realized then he wasn't trying to hurt me. Not yet. But he was unbalanced. Lost, like someone carrying the weight of the world on wet shoulders. I could see the outline of a story in his movements, a broken life that collided with mine by chance, in a storm. Hours later, he left as silently as he came. I knew I'd be waiting for him again, heart hammering, hands shaking. 2 days later, the woman's body was discovered in the woods near Route 93. Police said it was murder. My stomach turned. I'd seen her car, her blood. I remembered the pacing man, the storm, the hollow eyes. I took a walk that night, flashlight in hand, along the dark edges of the forest near the station. Rain had soaked the earth again. The wind pushed my hair into my face and I could hear the faint rhythm of footsteps. I thought about calling for backup, for someone official, but I knew if I did, he would vanish before they arrived. And then I saw it. A shoe print in the mud, too large, too deliberate. I followed it a short distance, heart racing. Then the sound, pacing, slow, deliberate, right behind me. "Stop following me," I called. No answer, just the echo of wet footsteps. I sprinted back to the station, locked all doors, and called 911. For the first time that night, I didn't feel powerless. I had evidence. The storm was still raging, but I felt some strange sense of agency. The police arrived hours later, combing the station in the nearby forest. The man had vanished again, leaving no trace. His presence felt like a shadow that only I could perceive. I stayed awake until dawn, listening, watching, heart pounding. After that night, I stayed on the graveyard shift as little as possible. I moved to a different station months later, closer to town, where the storms weren't so isolating. And though I never saw him again, I learned something important. Sometimes danger is real. Sometimes fear is justified. And sometimes the human mind will replay memories, blending past and present, creating ghosts that force you to pay attention. Trusting your instincts isn't paranoia. It's survival. Trust your instincts, respect your own fears, and never dismiss the quiet warnings that something feels wrong. Your awareness can be the difference between safety and disaster. I never thought I'd feel fear so sharp and immediate. It's different from nervousness or the low hum of anxiety that accompanies working the auto shop alone. Fear hits the chest first, then the stomach, and spreads until it makes your hands shake and your mind frantically search for logic that isn't there. That morning, driving along Highway 70 toward Quincy, I felt that exact fear coiling inside me. Cole Harper rode shotgun, quiet except for the occasional cough and the shifting of his backpack. I kept glancing at the dashboard, trying to ignore the black sedan parked at the small, abandoned gas station a few miles back. Something about the way the driver watched us had set off a primal warning I couldn't shake. At the time, I had dismissed it. Too much coffee, too little sleep, paranoia from living alone after Dad passed. But now, as the first faint orange smear of sun cut across the horizon, my skin prickled at every shadow. Mara's voice echoed in my head. "Ethan, don't get into trouble, please. Just call the police if something feels wrong." I had promised her I'd check on Mr. Donovan, our boss, who lived alone in a Victorian house at the edge of town. He hadn't answered calls in 2 days. Normally he was surly but punctual. This silence was unlike him. "Ethan, we shouldn't..." Cole's voice was a low murmur, breaking the silence. I know, I whispered, clutching the steering wheel tighter. "But I have to check. Just a quick look." Cole's eyes flicked toward the road. "We stay together. Slow. Keep your hands visible." I nodded, camera dangling around my neck like a shield, a ridiculous habit I'd picked up in high school. Photography had been my escape, a way to frame the world in something controllable. Today, it felt useless. Nothing could frame what I feared might be waiting at Donovan's house. The road narrowed as we approached the Victorian. The front gate creaked in the wind. The brass key on the old door jiggled in its lock. The door was ajar. I swallowed hard, stepping out. The air smelled of dew, gasoline, and something darker I couldn't identify. Cole's hand hovered near the concealed gun under his jacket. I tried to steady my breathing, reminded myself that Donovan was just a human, capable of being late, of oversleeping, or sick. Logic. But my chest still twisted. A shiver ran down my spine as the wind pushed the old wooden gate, echoing like distant footsteps. I forced myself to knock, then pushed the door slightly. Inside, the smell hit me first. Metallic, sharp and unmistakable. My stomach dropped. Cole gagged behind me, stepping back. I froze, unable to move, unable to look away. The kitchen was flooded with morning light, or what little seeped through the stained glass. Donovan's body lay sprawled across the floor, blood pooling around him. Time stopped. My mind tried to protest. He's not really. He is. Cole muttered, "Oh God," as if saying it would make the reality vanish. I crouched near the doorway, stomach churning, trying to find something familiar. Donovan's favorite coffee mug sat cracked on the counter, a teaspoon submerged in the coffee still half filled. I could almost hear his gruff voice telling me to stop gawking, but this time there was only silence. "Ethan." Cole's voice was tight, shaking. We need to call the police." I nodded, fumbling for my phone. My hands were trembling so badly the camera strap caught on my wrist. Memories of the gas station flashed. The black sedan, the attendant's eyes lingering on us, the uneasy feeling that someone had been watching. Could it have been the same people? Had they followed us here? We backed out slowly, closing the door behind us. The air outside felt cleaner, but nothing could remove the coppery smell lingering in my nostrils. The world seemed smaller, more dangerous, like the house had shrunk into a trap I had almost stepped into blindly. When the police arrived, they swept the area. Evidence confirmed that 2 local drug addicts had broken into Donovan's house, hoping to find money or valuables. They'd tortured him for information he didn't have. I kept replaying the gas station moment, wondering if the black sedan had been them scouting the area. The thought made my stomach knot tighter than before. I couldn't stop thinking about that gas station. Months earlier, it had seemed unremarkable. Just a lonely roadside stop with rusty pumps and a flickering neon sign. But now, in hindsight, I could see the warning signs I'd ignored. The attendant's gaze lingering too long. The black sedan parked too close to the pumps. The way the wind had carried a faint metallic smell across the asphalt. That night my mind had dismissed it as paranoia, the result of losing Dad, working too many late shifts, and the isolation that comes with small-town life. But I realized now that danger doesn't announce itself. It waits, sometimes in mundane places, until it finds its opening. I started driving past that route often, studying the highways, checking the small towns for anything out of place. I imagined the black sedan creeping through the fog, the same shadowy figures blending into ordinary nights, waiting for someone vulnerable. Every gas station, every empty lot, became a reminder of vulnerability. Cole noticed the change immediately. "You don't even sleep properly," he said one afternoon as we loaded a car for work. I nodded silently. No one could understand the way my chest tightened at neon signs or empty highway intersections anymore. Weeks passed, but I couldn't shake the morning of Donovan's murder. I replayed it endlessly. The cold metal of Cole's gun, the smell of gasoline and blood mingling, the helplessness on Cole's face as we backed out of the house. I thought of Mara, her voice trembling with worry, and I realized fear had found a permanent place in me. The black sedan remained in my memory, always just at the edge of perception. Driving past Highway 70, the silhouette would appear in my peripheral vision, parked silently, empty. The mind can play tricks, I told myself, but instinct is rarely wrong. I tried photography again, but even behind the camera, every shadow felt like eyes. Every reflection felt like someone watching. My escape was no longer frames on a screen. Fear had embedded itself in the mundane. Months later, I returned to Highway 70, driving past the old gas station. The neon sign was gone, replaced by a small market. The pumps rusted further. I slowed, eyes scanning, heart hammering. Nothing. But I knew it wasn't gone. Evil doesn't vanish. It hides in everyday places, disguised as normal, until someone lets their guard down. Mara noticed the change immediately when I got home. "You're different," she said, voice shaking. "You don't sleep, you flinch at nothing." I nodded. She was right. I had learned something crucial. Danger is real. Fear is real. But surviving it depends on listening to instincts, respecting warnings, and never underestimating the ordinary-looking threat. I still work along the highways, still take photographs, but I never ignore that small voice that says, "Watch, observe, be careful." Survival is about seeing the invisible, even when the world wants to convince you it isn't there. True danger often hides in ordinary places. Trust your instincts, respect your fears, and never dismiss the small signs of something wrong. Awareness can be the difference between life and death. I never liked driving alone on foggy nights. There's a way mist creeps over the asphalt, turning ordinary road lines into faint whispers that vanish and reappear, like the world itself is uncertain. Tonight, the Sierra Nevada foothills were shrouded in heavy fog, orange streetlights casting dim halos onto the slick pavement. Mark, my husband, was behind the wheel, his hands tight on the steering wheel, his jaw set in that protective line he always gets when something feels off. We were heading to a small 24-hour gas station about a mile ahead, a familiar stop on our trips to Yosemite. It was a place that usually smelled of gasoline and stale coffee, but tonight, the fog made it look almost otherworldly, isolated and vulnerable. The headlights caught movement on the roadside, a dark shape that barely shifted. "Mark, is that a bag?" I whispered, leaning forward. He slowed the car. "Looks like trash, but we can check. Better safe than sorry," he said, his voice calm but tight. I glanced at him, remembering the argument we'd had 2 nights ago. My solo travel assignments had been a point of tension. Mark worried. I insisted that my independence mattered. I can't ignore someone," I said then, voice trembling. He had sighed, tension in his jaw. "Fine, just don't do anything reckless, Lydia." Replaying that conversation, I felt my stomach knot. There was nothing reckless about stopping for someone in trouble. My moral compass, that drive to help, overruled caution. But fear tightened around me anyway. As we turned the car around, the shape resolved into a woman sitting on the foggy roadside, thin, shivering, drenched and small against the vast darkness. Her clothes clung to her, soaking wet. I rolled down the window, the cold fog brushing my cheek. "Are you okay?" I called softly. Her eyes flicked up at us, wide, fearful and desperate. I was supposed to meet my mother, at the gas station ahead. I can't make it," she murmured, voice hoarse. Mark glanced at me. The gas station now loomed in the fog, a lonely yellow beacon. We both felt the tension, the sense of sanctuary mixed with vulnerability. "We can take you there," Mark offered. She hesitated, eyes darting toward the fog-enshrouded pines. Then she nodded, gripping my arm. I need to get there," she whispered. We pulled her into the back seat. The car smelled of damp jackets and fear. She spoke in fragments, a violent ex-husband, threats, nights spent hiding in abandoned motels. Every creak of the seat, every truck passing on the highway seemed to amplify her anxiety, and ours. By the time the gas station neon appeared through the mist, the tension was unbearable. We parked, staying in the car as she scanned the parking lot, waiting for her mother. Even under the flickering lights, her wide, fearful eyes haunted me. The neon flickered again, buzzing faintly in the silence. I kept my hands in my lap, Mark's quiet presence beside me grounding me. The woman's breathing was shallow, hands clenching her knees. Every shadow in the parking lot seemed like a threat. I tried to distract her. "We'll wait here. Your mom will come soon." She shook her head, murmuring, I don't want him to find me. He's always looking. I swallowed, feeling a chill that wasn't from the fog. Who? I asked gently. My ex. He hurts people, she said, voice barely audible. Her trembling intensified, and I realized how vulnerable she truly was. Mark shifted in the seat, keeping his eyes on the surrounding darkness, protective and alert. Time stretched. A few cars passed, but the lot remained mostly empty. I noticed the pines surrounding the station, dense, dark, like silent watchers. Every crunch of leaves in the distance made me jump slightly. The fog seemed to move, hiding shapes that might or might not be real. I asked her, "Has he ever hurt you directly?" She flinched, shaking her head. "Not yet, but he's dangerous. Always finds me if I let my guard down. That's why I ran. I couldn't call anyone. Phones, they track you." Mark and I exchanged a glance. We understood then the depth of her fear. The small gas station was both haven and risk, a liminal space where danger could appear out of nowhere. Minutes felt like hours. Then headlights appeared in the fog, coming from the direction of the gas station. Her eyes lit up. "Mom," she whispered. Relief washed over her like sunlight breaking through clouds. She scrambled out of the back seat and ran toward the approaching car, collapsing into her mother's arms. Mark and I watched, silent, the tension slowly unwinding. Yet as we started the car and drove away, the fog seemed heavier, the shadows more persistent. I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness outside the neon glow still contained threats unseen. The drive back was quiet, filled only with the hum of tires on wet asphalt and the occasional passing truck. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see a figure in the fog, but there was nothing. At home, I sat with my journal open, pen hovering over the page. "You never really know how close danger is until you see it in someone else's eyes," I wrote. The memory of her shaking hands, wide eyes, and whispered fears pressed into me. Mark noticed my agitation. "You okay?" he asked, voice low. I nodded, though the tension hadn't lifted. The foggy road and that small gas station had etched themselves into my psyche. That night, sleep eluded me. Dreams of the fog, the lonely station, and the woman's trembling hand reaching out haunted me. Even months later, that stretch of Highway 120 remained a place I avoided, my mind replaying the small details, the neon flicker, the shadows in the pines, the smell of damp jackets in the car. I began noticing subtle shifts in my behavior. I double-checked locks on the house, hesitated before pulling over at roadside stops, and avoided deserted areas. Driving through fog anywhere triggered flashes of that night. Mark was patient, but he could see my nerves. "You're not driving here again, right?" he asked quietly one evening. I shook my head. "It's not just the road. It's realizing how easily someone's life can spiral, and how helpless we are when danger is so close," I said. Even freelance trips I once loved felt riskier. I started taking extra precautions, letting someone know my route, carrying a personal alarm and keeping my phone ready. Fear had sharpened my awareness, but also shadowed moments that should have been mundane. Months passed, and though the memory never fully left me, I began to process it. That night on Highway 120 reminded me that danger often hides in places that seem harmless. A gas station, a foggy road, the gap between ordinary and desperate. I learned to trust my instincts, to recognize fear as a signal rather than a weakness. The woman's vulnerability showed me the fragility of life and the responsibility we carry when we can act. Mark's steady presence reminded me that we can't face every threat alone. And sometimes the simplest acts, pulling over, offering help, staying cautious, can make the difference between safety and tragedy. Now I drive with awareness, journal with reflection, and remember that even ordinary roads hold stories, some terrifying, some hopeful, and some that simply remind us how fleeting normalcy can be. Danger often hides in plain sight. Trust your instincts, act with empathy, and never underestimate how quickly lives can be threatened, and how crucial small acts of courage can be. The wind tore through the gaps in the car door, rattling the frame and whispering over the frozen asphalt like it had secrets to tell. I shivered and tightened my scarf, wishing I'd packed something warmer than a thin jacket. Montana in late winter wasn't what I'd expected from the pictures online. It was sharper, lonelier, colder. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones and refuses to leave, like it had a purpose. Jenna was humming along to the low static of the car radio, her fingers tapping the wheel in a rhythm that almost made me forget the miles of emptiness stretching ahead. I'd insisted on taking this trip, wanted to see the vastness of the West, the way the light hit snow-covered plains, the abandoned buildings that held a kind of quiet poetry. But for every mile of beauty there was a mile of nothing, and sometimes that nothing felt alive. I pulled my camera from the seat beside me, fiddling with the strap. "Do you ever feel like you're driving into a story you can't get out of?" I asked, voice quieter than I intended. Jenna glanced at me, one eyebrow raised. "Only every time we leave the last gas station for 50 miles. I laughed nervously. "It's more than that, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm running from something." She sighed. "Running from your brother's nagging or from your own paranoia?" I didn't answer. I knew the truth. Earlier that morning I'd had the same argument I'd had 100 times before with Alex. He thought I was wasting my life chasing shadows, chasing images that didn't pay rent or bills. I didn't tell him how wrong he was, or maybe I couldn't. Photography wasn't just my passion. It was the only thing that ever felt honest to me. And yet, there was a gnawing fear that maybe he was right. That in all these miles, all these clicks of the shutter, I was only trying to prove something to someone who'd never care. The gas gauge dipped dangerously low, a flashing red light glaring at me like a warning. "Next stop, gas," Jenna said. "I don't care how creepy it looks." When we finally saw the neon glow of the abandoned station, it felt like a relief. The sign flickered sporadically, letters dying mid-blink. A tumbleweed scraped across the asphalt, making the silence heavier. I parked under the weak glow, the tires crunching over the thin layer of ice. The building had clearly been out of service for years. Paint peeling, windows dusty, pumps dented and lifeless. "It feels wrong," I whispered, gripping the pump handle and pretending to check the gauge. "I don't know why, but it feels wrong." Jenna shot me a look. "It's abandoned, that's all. Just focus on not freezing to death, okay?" Her humor helped, a little. But it didn't last. A voice sliced through the cold. "Hey. Hey there." I froze. The sound didn't come from the gas station. It came from the shadowed edge of the lot. A man stepped forward. Brown coat, red shorts. The absurdity of the clothing didn't make him any less unsettling. He walked with deliberate steps, the kind of slow, deliberate that makes your heart skip in ways you can't explain. Jenna moved closer to me. "Let's just go," she whispered. My hand twitched toward the camera hanging at my chest. Every instinct screamed danger, but some part of me wanted to see him clearly, to frame him, to understand before panic. He stopped 10 feet away, tilting his head as if assessing us, then muttered into a flip phone. The red shorts flashed in the neon light, ridiculous, unsettling, like something from a dream you wish you could forget. I swallowed, the bitter air scraping my throat. The distance between us seemed smaller with every second, and I realized then that sometimes fear isn't the absence of sense. It's the presence of the unknown, the unmeasured, the unpredictable. He didn't approach further, but his presence was heavier than the snow. Jenna straightened her shoulders. "We're not alone," she called out, trying to sound braver than she felt. The man flinched, his eyes flicking toward us, then back at the dark stretch of highway. His flip phone snapped shut with a sound that made me jump. He melted into the shadows before we could make a decision. I exhaled sharply, feeling adrenaline ripple through my veins. "Did you see that? He just disappeared." Jenna nodded, gripping the wheel. "Yeah, and I don't want to see him again." We stayed in the car for a few moments, the hum of the heater barely cutting through the chill. I clutched my camera, fingers tight around the strap. The abandoned gas station no longer felt like a stop, it felt like a trap. The shadows seemed thicker now, the neon flickers more urgent, warning us to leave. I shouldn't have argued with Alex today, I muttered. I shouldn't have left him. Left anyone. Jenna glanced at me, eyes soft. Harper, you're here now. That's what matters. You're not alone. I wanted to believe her. But even as we drove back onto the empty highway, the image of him, brown coat, red shorts, unblinking stare, stayed with me. I thought of the documentaries I'd seen, the warnings about travelers alone in the night, stories of strangers who preyed on the isolated. The camera on my shoulder felt suddenly heavier. Hours passed in silence. Snow whipped against the windshield, tires hissing on ice. I rested my head against the window, but my mind replayed the scene endlessly. I felt exposed, vulnerable, aware that danger didn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waited, sometimes it smiled behind a mask of absurdity. By the time we found a safe motel in Bozeman, my hands were numb, not just from the cold, but from the lingering tension. I couldn't shake the feeling that the man was watching, that the abandoned gas station had eyes, that the world was bigger, darker, and more unpredictable than I'd allowed myself to think. Even after days on the road, I couldn't shake the memory of him. Every gas station, every flickering neon light, every shadow stretching longer than it should, sent a shiver through me. I tried to photograph the landscapes, to remind myself why I was here. But my shots began to reflect tension. Empty pumps, snow-laden rooftops, a car door left open. The camera no longer captured beauty alone. It captured the echo of fear, the sense of being watched. Jenna noticed my change. "You're different," she said one night as we set up camp near a frozen river. "You're seeing something most people miss. Or maybe something is missing inside you now." I didn't argue. She was right. There was a vulnerability I couldn't shake, a reminder that solitude on the road carried risks beyond the physical, and fear had a way of following you home. Weeks later, I found myself back at a gas station on the outskirts of Billings. The neon flickered. I felt it before I saw it, a presence, maybe imagined, maybe real. My hands tightened on the camera. I remembered the man in red shorts, the brown coat, the slow, measured steps. I realized then that I wasn't just afraid of strangers. I was afraid of helplessness, of the unknown, of what could happen when preparation meets unpredictability. And I knew that fear, while primal, could teach me. It could teach me caution, awareness, and the value of trusting someone beside you. Jenna and I drove in silence for the next hours. We didn't talk about the man. Words wouldn't help. We relied on instinct and companionship. I realized that fear is not just a reaction. It's a teacher, if you let it be. I continued photographing empty stations, highways, abandoned towns. My work changed. It captured tension, the faint suggestion of a watcher, the vulnerability in wide-open spaces. And while I still shivered when I saw a shadow too long or a flickering neon sign, I had learned to honor the feeling rather than let it dominate me. The moral, I think, is simple. The world contains unknown dangers, yes, but fear only paralyzes if faced alone. Companionship, vigilance, and self-awareness are the real shields. And sometimes, documenting the darkness isn't just about art. It's about learning to navigate life with your eyes wide open. Fear and vulnerability are inevitable, but they become manageable when we acknowledge them, stay aware, and rely on the trust and presence of others. Real courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting wisely despite it.